Welcome all to the Infinite Insight series. Thank you for your participation. I think we have almost 200 registrants today, so we're excited about that. My name is Sarah Singer, and I am Head of Customer Success. And I'm going to be moderating today's discussion along with Dr. Courtney Stevens. Doctor, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Courtney Stevens. I'm the Vice President of Education Research here at Inuit. And so Sarah and I are excited to welcome you today. We're going to be talking through a variety of different topics. Today we're lucky enough to be joined by some of our partner districts that are going to get a chance to kind of showcase a variety of things that they're thinking and things they've worked through with the solution as part of their district. And so we are going to run today much like a panel. So we're going to do some introductions. And then ask our three participating partners today to showcase a little bit about themselves and the systems they come from, and give you guys a chance throughout the course of today to ask questions as things come up. We will be using the Q&A function in the webinar set, and so we'll be continuing to monitor that as we go through today. So if you have questions, have different things that you'd like to see, anything that you want to know or follow up, or just like, great job. Thank you guys for participating and sharing with us. Please feel free to engage as much as you're capable today.
Great, so I'm going to set the stage for today's convening. In doing so, I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've been, where we're headed, and how that relates to today's discussion. So if we want to kind of rewind, sometime, probably in March for most of you, the vast majority of schools were required to close. And in response, districts essentially had to, and I mean literally, transform the K-12 education delivery model. And they had to do that in an industry sort of not known for its rapid pace of change, and they had to do that in 3 weeks. So that's actually pretty amazing. I know we've all been in sort of crisis management mode, but if you kind of just stop back and reflect, that's, I think, an amazing accomplishment. Now, going forward, many of us, and I think most of the districts I've talked to, don't necessarily know how they're going to reopen. They know there's some scenarios. They know it's probably some type of hybrid model, some remote learning, some in-person model learning. But all we know is that we're in a position right now where we have to plan with immense uncertainty. So this is our situation. This is the context in which we find ourselves. And to operate in this context, the only thing we know for sure is to be successful, we have to be adaptable, we have to be nimble, we have to be innovative, and we have to be creative. We know there's going to be new educational delivery models, new instructional models. We're going to have new supports, new services to support our students. And in light of all of that, with all that context, we need to be able to monitor progress of all of the above for the benefit of the students. And maybe using new measures to do so. We're in just completely unprecedented times. And so with that stage, with that kind of context in mind, we've invited 3 districts who I believe are demonstrating the type of mindset that I just talked about, which is they're innovative, they're creative, they have found ways to adapt in these quite frankly, crazy, unprecedented times. And so I am really happy to have our 3 panelists here today. I'd like to thank them for being willing to share for the benefit of all of us, and excited to get the conversation started. With that, Courtney.
Yeah. Most definitely. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with Anthony Paternos and ask him to go ahead and do a quick kind of introduction about who he is, his background, and a little bit about the system that he's here representing today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Paternos, and I'm currently the Executive Director of Technology for Osteo area schools. And a little bit about our district. We are located in Minnesota. We're a northern suburb of the Minneapolis area. In terms of Minneapolis, or the Minnesota in general, we're the 5th largest school district in the state, serving just over 21,000 students pre-K through 12. We have a very diverse district with 58% students of color. We've got 39% of our students being served with free and reduced price lunch services, 14% special ed, and 11% multilingual learners within our school district that we serve. And excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I appreciate that. Matt Raimondi, can I have you go next?
So I'm Matt Raimondi. I work in School District U46, which is in Elgin, Illinois. We're a western suburb of Chicago, and we serve more than just Elgin. We serve a few neighboring communities. It's a K-12 district. We got 40 elementaries, 8 middles, 5 high schools, a couple alternative schools. And we also are a diverse district. Over half of our students are Hispanic, and many of them begin as English language learners. We're about 60% low income. And we have some schools that have very little, maybe only 10% low income. And we have some schools that are 100%. So not only do we have like a variety of students, like all of our schools are somewhat different too. And I work in the assessment and accountability office. So I do a lot of the work with the testing, which didn't happen this spring. And a lot of the kind of like strategic planning and school improvement work, and the dashboards really are like a tool that helps support and drive our work.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate that. And Brandy, Icing, can I have you go next?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good morning and good afternoon. My name's Brandy Iskin. I'm the coordinator of the data warehouse and reporting for Howard County Public School System. I've been with them since 2016. My team specifically is responsible for the data warehouse, Who Knew It development, official reporting, and ad hoc requests. The Howard County Public School System is a mid-sized district. We serve approximately 60,000 students and have 76 schools and several programs as well. We're located in Howard County, Maryland. And we rolled out our Who Knew It to staff in 2017.
Thanks, Brandy.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go ahead and kind of jump into the fun part of today. And we're going to have the panelists go in order and do a little bit of sharing around the actual dashboard work and kind of the stories of their districts and how they've used data both through the spring and how that may be some informing some things as they move forward. So we're going to ask Anthony to go first and share some highlights of how Osteo is using data and how that played a key role for them this spring.
Yeah, and we're kind of in a unique situation as a newer partner with Who Knew It. We had used a variety of data solutions for many years prior to this past school year, and we're doing a transition into Who Knew It to consolidate and make a greater meaning of our data for our entire system to inform and drive decisions. And then we had the fun experience of COVID-19 hitting and shifting into distance learning and trying to navigate and understand what that means. So we had built a lot of meaning around what does data mean and how do we use data to operate day in and day out in our traditional school settings. But everything got turned upside down as we tried to figure out how we move forward. And a few of the things just to know as we transitioned to distance learning, our district had a one-to-one program in grades 4 through 12. And as we started thinking about instructional delivery model, we had to figure out what instruction is going to look like and how are we going to get resources into the hands of our students. So two of the big task from a technology landscape that we needed to start with is getting a device into every student's hand, and as well as addressing the internet access gap that we had within our organization, and trying to understand what that is. Because in a normal school scenario, even in our one-to-one program, we have a variety of ways students can get internet access to engage with different resources, because businesses are open, and community spaces that had internet access were open. Apartment buildings that had a common internet space where students could congregate was accessible, where when we went into our shelter in place and stay at home order, those places all shut down. So we had a wide gap that we needed to address and determine. And once we got those resources in the hands of kids, then it was about understanding participation and engagement, and was instruction actually being delivered. And so the one dashboard, which is a standard dashboard within Who Knew It Essentials that we relied on a lot as we got started, was really around our attendance data. So teachers were reporting attendance on a daily basis around seeing students engage and show up, whether it's interacting digitally or making a phone call or an email. And understanding just how many students were participating, and if they weren't participating, trying to reach out and understand what the barriers were for them to engage with. And we learned very quickly that there were a variety of scenarios, because of this data we could pull on attendance, of why students may not have been attending. We had, families in separated situations where mom and dad lived in different parts of the state, and they decided to split their children up during the time period. And so now the student was still attending the school district, but was living with a parent that wasn't on record, so they weren't getting communication. We have students that had, permanently left to go be with family in other states, and were not going to be returning back to the state during this time period. Which this attendance data was critical for understanding those needs. The other piece that was essential for us, and where we added, you'll see attendance for the last 15 days. So Minnesota has a truancy enrollment process that after students don't show up for 15 consecutive days, that they need to be unenrolled from the school district. And that process did not change in our distance learning environment. They gave some greater flexibility for disciplinary actions around truancy, but the 15 consecutive day process didn't end. So we really wanted to be intentional and target students that, as we were continuing through multiple weeks of distance learning, of understanding who our students were that were at risk for not engaging with our system and getting to that 15-day mark where we would have to unenroll students, and wanted to make sure that we had some form of engagement or accounting of what was going on with our students, to try and support them through the myriad of challenges that they were navigating, not necessarily trying to learn within this experience, but family and home situations that compounded sometimes the challenges during this time period. Courtney, if you flip to the next slide, this is how we started tackling our internet needs. And with partnering with Who Knew It, we spun up a version of Decision Insights, which is kind of one of the newer arms of applications that exists. And what we built in very quickly is a mechanism for starting to account for students who had and didn't have internet access in their homes. Which has actually turned into a process that we're thinking about long-term, that this is going to benefit us whether we're in distance learning or not, and looking at incorporating in our enrollment process as new students coming in, just asking these technology and internet needs so we can start tracking them in our student information system, and then be able to build data sets out of this. But we really used this mapping tool in Decision Insights as we gathered all the data. We did a pretty strategic reach out with principals and teachers, reaching out to their students and understanding who had access and who didn't have access. And as we got that data back, we implemented it in our student information system, which then allowed us to put a geolocation of where internet access needs were. So as we were trying to strategize and partner with our cities and our county around how we can best serve our students and get them connected to internet resources, we could see if there were concentration in certain spaces. It allowed us to be able to identify in particular apartment complexes, whether they were large apartment complexes or small apartment complexes, where we may have large internet access needs, and then look at different strategies beyond just the mobile hotspots that some districts provided. So we could try and find broader range internet access connectivity. It also assisted with providing data to our cities and our counties, because I really strive to engage a partnership, because there's strong recognition that internet access and technology access is essential for delivering learning. But there's also a lot of county and city services that go to students and to their families, and internet and technology access has become a critical component. So being able to triage solutions to support the resource needs that our families had as we move forward to deliver instruction. Moving forward, we've got a lot of thinking going around about the data sets we're currently using within Who Knew It to inform instructional practice, but what are those new data dashboards that we need to start building that can benefit us now to understand and make sense of what happened this spring and where our students are at in terms of engagement and in terms of technology access, but how do we start moving into and thinking about what does it look like for academic data to make meaning of the potential gaps and challenges we're going to see. And as others had mentioned, Minnesota didn't do our state assessments this spring, so there isn't a lot of formalized assessment data that was necessarily collected through this time period, and having to process through what data exists now and what data we still need to collect as we're making meaning moving forward.
Awesome, thank you, Anthony. And I know a couple of questions have come up through chat. So people loved, Anthony, to kind of see the use of DI and the different things that you guys were thinking through and using the mapping functionality. So just as a reminder to everyone out there, while we do prediction analytics for enrollment, we also have the location mapping functionality that you're seeing here. So that is something that we're providing to all of our analytics customers free of charge to help support them as they go through kind of the spring closure, which we're working through now, but still trying to make some decisions to really understand the needs of students as you think through, hybrid, AB, one of the 8 different things everybody's kind of, throwing at the wall, hoping something sticks right now. And so if this is something that you think would have some value for your kind of getting back up to school and running, again, through the end of August, we'd be happy to support working with you to get your data in to see if this mapping functionality can help you in your system as we try to bring kids back to some sense of norm. So thank you so much, Anthony, for sharing. If there are any additional follow-up questions or different things that Anthony talked about, again, please feel to continue to throw them in chat. We're going to go ahead and transition over to hear from Matt next and talk a little bit about what's happening over in Elgin. But please know, again, we'll have Anthony on with us through the end of today, and we'll be kind of revisiting back through.
Hi. So when all of the COVID stuff started to come out and schools started to close, we switched to 100% e-learning, and our district was not fully prepared for e-learning, similar to probably a lot of other districts, especially what we just heard of. We had one-to-one Chromebooks in grades 5 through 12, and we didn't have any student-issued devices K4. So at the beginning, we were rounding up devices. We were doing a triage, except we didn't map it on Google. We just had spreadsheets, and principals were going through the list and crossing them off. So it was really cool to see those dashboards there. And once we did get deployed, is we wanted to, basically the same thing. We wanted to find those families where they could be undergoing hardships, where they might not have devices, they might not have internet access. And what we started to do, and also keeping like equity in mind, like are certain students becoming further behind or less behind, like who are we reaching, who are we not reaching? So what we did was we took our attendance data and we just looked at it from, pre-COVID to our e-learning attendance. And then we also did other dashboards that looked at it by race, ethnicity, and we started to use this data a lot. We were looking at student data weekly over time to see where students could have had changes. And the dashboards that we developed, this one, this kind of goes with a question in the chat. How was data collected? I'll answer that. But these dashboards really became like the cornerstone of our work. Like we were on all administrator conference calls. It started out daily, and then there ended up being twice a week, where every administrator in our district, there are about 200 of us that would, hop on a Zoom call and, look at the data and, really see, we'd look at the district data, see what's improving, what's not, and what is the data? How did we do attendance? What the data was, is different in elementary and secondary, and we ended up kind of changing it. But for secondary, we did an attendance survey. It said, it went out and the students just had to mark, like, are you, able to work and do school today? I don't remember what the exact wording was, but once the students clicked yes, then they were marked present for the day. Now, does that mean that they went and did all of their e-learning activities? Not necessarily, but the reason that they were marked present for that, because we have students that walk into classrooms and kind of stare at the wall or put their heads down, and they basically are there and able to work, and they're accounted for their well-being, but engagement is something separate. So we were really concerned on just like attendance, like are we reaching them? And yeah, these dashboards and kind of sectioning it out really helped us look. And this was like taken in the middle of the e-learning. And then our data started to get better. And then towards the end of year itis hit in pretty hard, especially at the upper grades, when our high school students, their attendance started to drop out at the end. But we did see, after doing this and breaking the data apart by these different groups, we did see gains in our most at-risk populations, which was good. It's what we wanted to see. Did we close the attendance gap entirely? No, we definitely still had gaps for our at-risk groups, but we did see gains for it. So that was exciting.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to jump back to Anthony real quick, if you don't mind, just to kind of answer that same or have that same dialogue about attendance. There was lots of questions that popped up around how did you define attendance? Did you do something similar to what Elgin did with the survey? But as we looked at your dashboard showing kind of those attendance measures, people had lots of questions about how you were tracking.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think, first mindset, and we had to make sure that teachers and staff could separate attendance versus engagement. So just like, Matt described, you know, students show up all the time and get marked as present because we have an accountability for them. Attendance is really defined around, we know where a student is, and we've got, you know, accountability for their whereabouts and well-being. So our attendance practice wasn't quite like a daily survey. So teachers had to report attendance within a 3-day window. So if they were able to see their students engage with them, whether it was a phone call, an email, checking into Schoology, Seesaw at the elementary level, or one of our other tools, then that counted as the teacher had an ability to check in and know or have an accountability of that student. Whether they actually completed something is a different conversation. If they did not see a student for 3 consecutive days, then they reported that to their main attendance clerk, who then just recorded absences within Synergy. That's our student information system. And part of our reason for having a 3-day window, if we think about the flexibility and adaptations that students may need depending on their situation. If they needed more parent support to be able to engage with the technology or the resource, and both their parents were critical care workers, so they were working all day, students might not show up until the end of the day. Or we definitely had high school students that would show up and crank out 3 days worth of work and then not show up for a couple days and then come back and re-engage with some different classes. Or they might spend the first 2 days doing math, and then they'll show up in their English class for the next 2 days. So we kind of had that 3-day window as creating the flexibility for students and families to navigate what their home situation was in order to show up, be present from an attendance perspective, as well as be able to engage academically in the learning process.
Thank you for that. We, in our district, we call that the proof of life strategy. Like, you just need some kind of, some proof that they exist, whether they completed anything or not, but, you know, some eyes on a kid in some way to show that there's been something. So I appreciate that.
Hey, Anthony, follow-up question on that. Did you find that there were any issues with teachers sort of inputting attendance in that process?
So we're doing, again, a lot of reflection and have been collecting a lot of survey data post-distance learning to process through perception on it. But we actually did not have the teachers put the attendance in. Typically, teachers would put in the daily attendance, but we're trying to get teachers in a space to focus on just instruction. So their task was, if they did not see a student engage, report it to the attendance clerk, and then our attendance clerks managed all the data entry. So it was all funneled into one space to navigate that. Again, trying to make more of a priority of teachers, you focus on instruction. If you're not seeing a student, make sure this person knows, and they'll take care of getting the data inputted.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for jumping back in. I went a little bit out of order. I think Brandy was all ready to go next, and I curtailed her. So, Brandy, you're up.
Thank you. Okay, what I'd like to do is take you through some examples of dashboards we built as the schools and offices were shut down. So during phase 1, our 2 main drivers were all students in grades K through 12 who requested a device needed to receive one. And we also needed to put together our distance learning model and implement it. So the data warehouse team got together, and our main question is, what can we do to help? How can we support leadership, staff, and students? So the district's first initiative was to get students Chromebooks. So if you look at this dashboard example, technology overview, what I'd like to show you here is, if you look at the metric on the far right, that is a breakdown of students and families that requested devices, internet, and also students and families that did not respond. Initially, that was the main metric, but as we evolved, we had to build out this dashboard to meet our needs. So that's why you see on the left the monitor blocks. So as we began to distribute devices via location and then via FedEx, we wanted to display how many devices were being issued and then how many devices that were requested had not yet been issued. So this dashboard supported the IT team for distribution. It also supported the leadership and school staff so that they could make sure that students were getting what they needed in a timely manner. And then as things evolved even more, we added additional metrics. You'll see the check-in, check-out. And so, for example, as 12th graders graduated at the end of our school year, we needed a way to see that their devices were being returned or checked in. What you don't see here is when you drill in, we were able to drill down to the student level and provide what devices they were provided, the serial numbers. Also, if it was shipped via FedEx, we were able to include the FedEx link that went right to the site for FedEx. So it was kind of like a one-stop shop for them to get their technology information. Some of the challenges were getting all of the different data in. So you'll hear that throughout the slides I go through. It was constantly trying to figure out, can we get the data in? Can we get it in a timely manner? Because we only, school was ending. Yesterday was our last day of the regular school year. So we needed to make sure these tools were going to be available in a timely manner. So if you go to the next slide, as the time progressed and we went into phase 2, we really just wanted to find out who was logging in. And so we were looking at our single sign-on into the Howard County Active Directory. So that as students were getting devices, were they logging on? They were asked to do certain tasks at home. Were they getting on? And the most important thing for this engagement dashboard was to find the students who were not logging on, or as you drilled in and you saw who was having active engagement, what type or how often were they engaging? Was it just the first week and then we never saw them again? And again, the school support teams were using this as part of their process to keep an eye and work with the families to make sure that they were getting the support they needed and getting a contact if they were not actively engaged. Okay, so as the weeks rolled on, we began to develop additional dashboards. So that dashboard that you saw before, the passive engagement, became less important. We rolled out our continuity of learning, our distance learning model, and it had 2 primary components: learning activities and virtual class check-ins. So we built 2 additional dashboards, one for middle school and high school based on their needs, and one for elementary school. And they looked very similar to the passive engagement dashboard, but they included the data for the applications that those students were now being asked to engage in. So what you see right here on this slide is when you drill down into the data for any of these dashboards, you will get very consistent data: the student's name, their school, their grade, their demographics. And then on this one, this is for our elementary school students, and they were tasked with using Dreambox, LexiaCore, and Google Meet. And so we needed to bring in that data, and you'll see for this specific drill, we drilled into 7 days. We were able to show how many times that student was on per day, or once a day per that week, and then how many minutes they were on. And again, this was really a high level. It told you that that student was getting into that application. It wasn't indicative of what they were doing in that application. It was just to make sure that they were engaging, and also to make sure if they weren't engaging, we were again making sure we were reaching out to those students and families. Okay, so as we rolled on, they had decided how we were going to implement Q4 grading. Students were going to receive a pass or an incomplete. And so users were used to having a grades monitor dashboard. So what we did is we built a specific dashboard that looked and acted exactly like their grades monitor dashboard, but it was just for Q4 and would show those pass and incompletes. The thing that they would primarily and will continue to use this dashboard is for the students who have incompletes. They have until September 15th to change that incomplete to a pass. And this data, again, this was taken right from Synergy, so this was a little more straightforward than the other dashboards. So far, these dashboards have been a success. They've been adopted by users on a daily and weekly basis. It's a tool they're familiar with. Like I said before, it's kind of a one-stop shop and allows them to get a lot of the different data in the different ways they need to see it aggregated at student level as well as department or school level. And it was the data we needed to ensure students were staying on the school staff's radar and getting the technology and support they needed.
I love so many of these things that you guys created, Brandy. I can completely see why this was a mecca where everybody came to see, because there's some awesome things in here that I'm sure were well loved and well used. I love just all of the drill to options off of that metric. I'm making notes for my team. Yeah, about some things I'd love to see in other places too that you guys have created. So along those lines, if you don't mind, because I know you're pretty actively involved in the creation of things in your system, and I'll probably cycle back to Anthony and Matt. I know they've got some other members of their teams kind of floating behind them also, but there's lots of questions from the group just talking about, you know, how did you make this stuff, you know, and when you think about kind of developing new metrics and some of that. I know you talked about, you know, kind of that process of bringing data in and, you know, always having to kind of gut check to say, is this something that we can do in a timely enough manner to have it add value? If you can talk just a little bit about kind of your development process, I think there's a lot of interest.
Sure. So bringing in the data was definitely a challenge. So in some cases, such as the FedEx data, we might have used we used an API call. For other things like LexiaCore, it was much more manual, and we had to export a file from the application and then load it daily. Dreambox had an FTP site available where they posted the report, which made it a little more automated for us. But when we were developing this, we knew that it wasn't necessarily a sustainable model because it was so manually driven. So as we look forward for next year, if we are going to continue distance learning or providing this type of data, we will need to figure out a way to make it more automated rather than having to depend on these files being posted and then picking up the data from the file. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. The one that was in there, is there, Anthony or Matt, do you or any of your teams want to talk just a little bit about kind of the process you went through to create some of these newer things that you used this spring?
So what I did was I talked to Danielle Peppa and told her our needs, and she basically did everything. I worked with through her on some ideas of, like we could start with some of the attendance reports that are already built that we have, and then we'd make a copy of it and add a where clause to say, like, here, it's starting from here. And Danielle did all the work. I think I maybe change the title of a graph here or there, but really she's the one that's doing all the work. The way I describe my job sometimes, I'm like, Danielle does all this great work, and then I just kind of go around and talk about it. So I don't know if she is on right now or not. I think she said she's going to be on.
Yeah, I'm on.
Okay. Did I pretty much describe that accurately there, Danielle?
Yeah, for the most part.
Danielle, is there anything you want to add about the process you used, or just to share a little bit with those groups that maybe haven't necessarily jumped in to try to tackle things on their own yet? Anything you want to share with the group?
Or advice you might give to other folks who are taking on this challenge?
Copy all and pasting is a great tool. And yeah, I would basically, copy things from one dashboard over to another dashboard that had security way locked down. And I'd say, okay, Matt, how does this look? And he'd give me feedback. So that's the main piece. It was a lot. How
long did it take you to make it?
How long did it, what?
How long did it take you to develop these dashboards?
Because most of the metrics were already basically built, they needed some date parameters. It didn't take very long for me to chunk out a few of the basic dashboards we were using, like this one that's on the screen now. Yeah, so probably just a couple of days. But like I said, we have a lot of these metrics built already, and but we wouldn't have them. For example, with this one, we had the pre-COVID attendance and the e-learning attendance. So the pre-COVID attendance just has a date range up to what was it, March 13th, I think, and then the e-learning attendance was everything after that, but we had days when no one was doing anything because the state was still trying to get their act together, and then we had spring break, so we didn't actually start with e-learning attendance until March 31st. So it's really date driven, and then the IEP that was adding another filter in there. Show me just the students with the SPED indicator active, and the same with the EL metrics.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Dan. I appreciate it. Again, we've got a variety of partner districts on the line, and some of them have been with us a long time, and similar to you, have come up with kind of great strategies to quickly, monitor and adapt the dashboards. Some of them are newer into jumping into kind of the deep end of that pool. So we're always excited to have those people that are doing lots of internal customization work share those strategies out, just to kind of help everybody else maybe take that first courage-based step to get in and start to play. and start to develop some additional capacity to do some of these things on their own as well. So we appreciate that.
Hey, Courtney, I would add, I think, the strategy that Danielle talked about is very similar to Osteo, and being a newer Who Knew It partner. I would say for my team, it took a little bit of learning, but we basically used dashboards that already existed, copied them, and then did modifications to them, which was, again, trying to learn how those pieces work, but it went through very well, and we were able to spin up some, the new dashboards that we had relatively quickly, because we weren't trying to build something from scratch, and it was a good environment for us to play around and learn from at the same time.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping in on that. So I have a number of questions that are kind of popping up. So I'm going to jump around a little bit for here just a minute before, and some of them are kind of connected to thinking about, now that you've kind of identified some data sources, how's that, what else are you thinking about doing as you consider bringing students back in a variety of ways in the fall? So let me just kind of zip through here really quickly and see if there's we want to tackle before we jump into that. Okay, I think everything else probably is going to get touched on, at least for the most part, as we kind of transition to this new. So a couple of things have come up in chat. So I know there were some questions just about some dashboard functionality. I think definitely, especially as Brandy showed, the different ways that you can add drill to a metric. You can always kind of look at a split to school or drill down by grade level, a variety of different ways to be able to do some of that data. I know, Matt, there were some questions a little bit about when you talked about seeing some positive gains in attendance between some of your subgroups. Would you mind just talking a little bit more about that? People are really interested, I think, in the kind of revisiting the strategies you used and some of the success that you saw.
Sure, let me pull up our dashboards in the background just so I can see some of it. But I know, for example, like our African-American group had low attendance, and then they saw pretty large gains. And what we did to reach them was, one, we had principals track just on a Google sheet any students that they could not get a hold of that had 25% or less attendance to start. So basically, we're looking for students that we had no contact with. Then they had to say like what kind of contact they tried. Did they try email? Was it phones disconnected? Was it, like what, so like what kind of communication? And when they did get a hold of them, then they'd have to find out, was it device or was it internet? So there's some students that didn't take their Chromebooks home. They need to be picked up. Well, before they could just pick them up, we had to make sure, that there's someone there, device is clean, that the handoff was okay. And other people that had internet issues. So then our district also partnered with and worked a lot with Comcast to help get some of these, really needy families set up. So like Comcast offers their internet essentials for $10 a month. And we found that some parents maybe had Comcast a couple years ago, came into a hardship, and then wasn't able to pay. And then they had all these late fees and penalties and setup stuff. But we worked with Comcast with a bunch of families. And I think we had maybe 200 or 300 families that we were able to work with Comcast and the families to help them get connected. I'm pulling up dashboard here. So actually, there's no student stuff or anything on here. If I could share my screen for a second. Can I share? Does it let me do that? Let's see. Share screen. Let's see if it'll let me. Yeah, okay. So this graph we did was like by grade. So we could look at certain grade levels, but by ethnicity, for example, here, we could see, so yellow is our African American group. So they started out, it's kind of small, but they started out at about 68% attendance. And we're looking at, about 2,300 students in that group. And then we kind of peaked around here. So they went up about 10 percentage points almost. So from about 68% to 77%. And a lot of our groups kind of did increase kind of together. We would have liked to have seen more catch up where the gaps got smaller, and we didn't really see the gaps get smaller, but we did see things move in a positive direction. Let's see. So gender, kind of the same thing. EL, so a lot of our data started out lower and then eventually did improve. And then those last 2 weeks of school is like people just, they were done. They were done. Once we got to like that second, third, that week of May, the week of the 25th was like our last week. And it's like people were done at that point. After that, it's some summer school data. So I wouldn't look past the week of the 25th. But yeah, we did see like in general, here we kind of closed the gap, special ed. So special ed, we actually had a gap, no ODS, so there was a little gap. And then here, it's like all the dots kind of converged. So there we did actually kind of close the gap. But yeah, that's just kind of what I was talking about there. Did that help answer the questions people had?
Yeah, I appreciate you jumping further into that and showing some additional things too. So that was great. I loved being able to see how easy it was to have those things pop to the surface. So, and that's that's double digit gains. That's, yes, awesome. Great job. I did have kind of a couple of things pop up too, and then I think we're going to go ahead and shift gears into kind of thinking about, what's coming next with data and bringing schools back together. So one question came up and I did respond out to it, but I just wanted to kind of say it bigger picture in case not everybody's reading as they're listening. So one of the questions that came up was just around parent and student access. And, can parents see this data? Is that a possibility in the system? So know that we do provide, we have parent access and student access structured as really security set inside of our system. And so those are things that we can look at connecting with you about if that's something you have interest in. Similar to working with other security groups, you districts would need to make decisions about what kind of information you want them to be able to see and how you want that organized. But access is definitely available as part of the platform. So that if that isn't something that you've played around with yet, please know we're available to have that dialogue with you. In addition, Brandy, there's lots of stuff really excited, percolating about how you got data in, especially thinking about kind of the online data metrics around like Google and Lexia. I know you shared a little bit already. Is there anything else that you think would add value?
Our senior developer, Mike Prewy, is in the conference and he can probably answer that a little more technically than I can. Mike, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Hi, everyone. For both Lexia Core and Google Meets, the data is downloaded on a daily basis manually through the applications to CSV files. We had a little bit of contact with Lexia Core to enable that process to be done through FTP, but we were never able to get that to work. And similarly for Google Meets, we didn't really approach the API method of for downloading their log files, mostly for timing more than anything. As Brandy mentioned, this was like a short-lived thing, so we just decided to carry on with our manual process. So daily, the files were downloaded to CSVs. After they were available as CSVs, they're loaded into a staging table in the DW. And from there, they go into a fact table that we created, which these engagement dashboards that we created are all based on that fact table.
Okay. I understood most of that, so I'm proud of myself. Awesome. So I know if there are some additional technical questions, again, as we get further along we're going to kind of wrap up before we leave today and talk to you a little bit about kind of next steps and, a chance to meet some of the additional Hunua partners that could be available and kind of be thought partners for you as you transition into thinking about some things you learned today, and if you have follow-up questions about some of those different things. So I am going to go ahead and keep us moving. So the next kind of big conversation people are thinking about, again, as I know you guys are, is I think for the most part across the nation, people are have plan A through kind of F, depending on how life goes and as we get closer, what COVID numbers look like and any final guidance that comes out of Departments of Ed and the different state level components. But I'd love it if you had something to share just around maybe a little bit about what you're considering and how data kind of may play a role in that. What else outside of what you've already kind of pulled together? Is there anything else that you're really kind of thinking about or wondering about how different kinds of data will need to be utilized this fall? What's coming next on your data challenge, Anthony?
Yeah, and this is where I'm excited to see what some of my other colleagues are doing here on this call, in particular, Brandy, and how your team has been able to bring in some of those other engagement data. So in Osteo, we're actively in planning for what the next fall is going to bring. We've got 3 scenarios we're navigating through. One would be distance learning, so a continuation of what the spring was. The second would be all students return, but clearly with modifications with social distancing and other health safety guidelines. And then the third is a hybrid model, and Minnesota released initial guidance around all 3 of these models last week. So in our hybrid model, we have to operate with a 50% or less capacity of staff and students. So as we're thinking about data and how that's going to drive, one of the things that we're trying to process through is how do we build instructional systems and operational systems that are nimble and agile. So if we start in one model and a month later we need to shift into a different model, we can make those moves and navigate staff and then have common data sets that we can continue to move forward with to kind of track what that performance is, rather than trying to create just specific data sets for each scenario, which then you can't necessarily compare as we go throughout the school year. One of the big pieces that we're reflecting on is we brought in a lot of data outside of Hunua. So Schoology, Seesaw, we administered multiple surveys of the same questionnaire type to families throughout our distance learning experience to kind of measure those things that we haven't necessarily brought into Hunua to correlate with some of the other data pieces. So we are doing some thinking about what are those long-term data elements that, when we return in the fall and in terms of just moving forward in the future, that we can and should start building dashboards around and bringing into the system. And engagement data from our platforms is one of the key ones that we're processing through what that could look like. As I mentioned earlier, the technology access, the internet access is data elements we've already started to build as part of our future model moving forward. So as we shift in and out, and as we, get to a point of normalcy at some point in the future, what are those data elements that are going to continue with us and drive the new education experience that's going to come out of this after we're done with the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, if I can just add on to what Anthony just said, because we're in a very similar boat, and trying to work through all of those issues that he just mentioned. And then additionally, one of the big asks that came out of what we've already done is they want to know more about what students are doing in these new applications, or even the applications like we use Canvas that they're already using. Like, they want to know what the quality of work they're doing is, what kind of things they're doing, and so down to a much more granular level of looking at, the assignments they're completing and the grades on those assignments. And so, looking at how we can get them that data, and then how it can be, continued on as we, shift from distance learning to on-site, and maybe a combination of both. And then, as well as they change the processes and they change in our student information system, we need to be able to get that into our data warehouse and display it in a Who Knew It, so that the aggregated data can be seen historically and in the future.
Yeah, I would add one other big data element, and I don't know if the other districts are thinking around this, is around enrollment and enrollment projection process. In Minnesota, we're an open enrollment state, and when you are in a metropolitan area with a lot of school districts right next to each other, families can make choice and go to other school districts. Or even the thought process as we've navigated, if distance learning were to continue, we've heard some families on an inclining that they'd prefer to do homeschooling instead. So I know one of the big data points we're really thinking about is around what does enrollment modeling look like, and how do we plan for what those enrollments actually are going to be as we continue to move forward, and hopefully keep a stabilized enrollment within our system.
Yeah. So in Illinois, our state just released guidance, and the guidance just has a lot of kind of best practices, and some of it, the feasibility is very different than in other parts. So right now, what we're doing in a lot of neighboring districts, we're conducting a survey to our community to see kind of what their plans are, like like what they can do, what they can't do, what are kind of like non-negotiable elements with them, and what we're also going to do to complement the survey, because at least what I found in the survey is our most at-risk families are the least likely to complete the survey, and they're the ones that we end up going after. And if you think about, some of these surveys come across like a challenging standardized test, and it's like, oh, this is one I have to rank, and here this is a check, and it's some of these things just are not going to capture the information that we need. So what we're going to do is we have our list of students that we help with the internet access. We have a couple hundred families that were our very high risk. So after our survey goes out for a while, we're going to call the people on that list and be like, hey, we sent a survey out. Did you take it? And if they say yes, we're like, okay, great, just checking in. And then if they say no, then we'll be like, oh, well, hey, let me just ask you a couple questions if you have time, and then collect their feedback that way. So I mean, right now we're in the same boat as everyone else. We don't have any answers. We're trying to come up with 20 different plans, and we're not sure. But our data needs, I know that we're going to need data to drive our decisions and make sure that we're making the best choices that we can. Right before this call, I was kind of realizing, like, wow, we're going to need an indicator to say if it was a 100% in-person day? Was that a blended day? Was that a 100% e-learning day? And I think we're going to have to track this at the student level, because I know we're going to have some students where they're going to be going every day, like students with certain kinds of special ed needs and home needs, where these, you know, these students cannot stay at home and the families need to work. Like there's going to be students that need to report to school every day, and they might be in the same calendar, the same school building as someone else that might not, you know, be going every day. So, and then I know that our senior leadership is going to be like, so what does our data look like by blended versus this and subgroups? And I do know that that's going to be a need. And then the engagement with a lot of the different software is really exciting to see some of that kind of like API work and stuff there that I can imagine that we'll probably start doing something similar too.
Awesome. Well, it's just exciting to hear kind of, you know, what people are thinking and what people are doing, and kind of, you know, again, learning from each other with next steps, and just to kind of start some of that creative thinking about what the power of data could be needed, and different ways it could be used. So I'm going to jump somebody, I'm going to go a little off script and jump somebody in. And so I'm going to ask Robert, who's joining us from Mesa. They've in the Arizona area. So they've done some interesting things also in looking at gathering data around COVID and school closures, and using some things for the fall, specifically using our Power BI functionality in the platform. And so it's a little bit different from what we saw in terms of kind of hard coding or creating dashboards. So I'm going to ask Robert to unmute himself. I did not prepare him in advance, so I just kind of poked him. But as fellow Arizona people, he was nice enough to tell me yes. So thank you, Robert, for jumping in a little blindly here for me.
You are more than welcome. So one of the things that we were interested in looking at was we wanted to know a little bit about how our parents and our students and our staff reacted to, or how they felt after the remote learning, after the closures and after the remote learning. So right before the end of the school year, we sent a survey using our survey software to parents, students 7th through 12th grade, and to our staff, asking them questions about what it was like. We asked, did they feel like they were informed by the district? Did they think that our messages were clear and understandable? We also asked them what kind of things they would want or not want as far as safety precautions when we returned to school in the fall. We asked, you know, would you like kids to maintain social distancing, wear masks? Would you like employees to wear masks? Would you want the daily temperature checks and those kinds of things? And parents and staff and students were all able to answer those things. And then we took all of that data from our survey software, and then we uploaded it using the survey module into our warehouse. And then we built BI reports for all of the different surveys. So principals, our teams who were designing and looking at what would the opening of school look like could use that data to inform some of their decision making. One of the things that was clear from the data is that parents and students still wanted to be able to do recess and extracurricular activities. And so we've really worked as a district to try to continue to be able to do those things for our kids and still be as safe as possible doing those things. And all of that came from these surveys. We ended up getting, for those of you who don't know about Mesa Public Schools is a suburb of Phoenix. We're actually the largest school district in Arizona, and we have around 64,000 students. And so we ended up getting somewhere around 30 to 40,000 responses in our across all of our surveys from staff, parents, and our students. Is that anything else you want me to, did I miss anything? What else? Any questions anybody has? I'm happy to go into more detail or answer other questions.
I will make sure I poke at you if stuff comes up, I promise.
Okay.
Thank you for the impromptu share. I just, when it came across my desk that that you guys were doing some cool stuff with Power BI and really kind of incorporating those surveys, you know, we definitely wanted to make sure we highlighted the work that you do and the work that you guys are doing, just to kind of add again to different things to be considering that we can use the platform for to help inform decision making for coming back in the fall. So I know people would love to see an example of a Power BI. I'm not going to put you that bad on the spot, but we definitely will work with Robert to get something out to give you guys some examples of some things that he's working on or talking about. So I won't make him do that today live, but we definitely will provide you some support. You're welcome.
One of the things that
all my favors in one webinar.
One thing that I will say is we really liked, we looked and talked about how we wanted to present the data to our schools and our staff and our superintendents and everybody. And we talked about different options in different ways. And we really liked the Power BI option because they were really fast to get out there and set up. Once we got the data into the dashboard, it was really easy to build the dashboards. We were able to take advantage of some of the row-level security that's there. And we were able to get the data out there a little bit faster than I think we would have if we had built a traditional dashboard with it. So that was a big consideration, and we were really pleased with how the fast turnaround that. So we really like the Power BI option.
Awesome, thanks for that, Robert. So just as a reminder, even if some of you guys aren't using right now, Power BI does come as part of the Just Who Knew It Essentials platform. And so if you have some interest, again, if you haven't necessarily jumped into playing around with some of that functionality, that's a great thing to follow up with as well with your customer success team. So I think our questions have kind of slowed down. I think people are just kind of excitedly overwhelmed and processing through all of the great stuff that they saw today. And so I want to make sure we give a last call for questions before we jump into kind of wrapping up for the day. I think people are questioned out, which is good. So I want to just say thank you. I know that, you know, finding time as everybody is super busy is really hard right now. So I appreciate the work that Brandy and Anthony and Matt put into preparing some things to share today. They're great partners, as many of the rest of you on the call have shared ideas with us too. So I'll be excited to continue to highlight districts as we move forward in being able to continue to learn from each other as part of kind of this series and pulling our groups together. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys sharing. I know sometimes it's not easy to do, is to kind of showcase the things that you've built with others for feedback. So again, really, really appreciate your partnership today and your willingness to share with the group. So I'm gonna pass it off to Sarah to help close us down.
Yeah. Thanks, Courtney. So the first couple of things I want to say, again, thank you for your participation. At Who Knew It, we do have some exciting plans for the future that we hope will assist you during this time. So the first thing to note is one of our goals is we're releasing some new developer tools, and we want to be able to create efficiencies in doing that. We also want to be able to broaden the user base so that that you're able to build and sort of customize your own views with greater ease. So some of you may have heard what Howard County did and said, that's awesome. I'm not sure that our organization has the capacity to do that for whatever reason. And so our goal is, for example, we're going to be releasing in July our query designer tool. So that should make this easier for you all to build these dashboards. And we all know that at this point, and I kind of led with this, we need to be able to be flexible, nimble, we need to be adaptable. So that's our philosophy here at Who Knew It, is to help you do that, because that to me is probably the most important thing that we can do to help you. So that's one of our primary objectives. And so if you are interested, for example, in learning more about the Query Designer tool, we contact your data consultant on the customer success team, and we can set up a demo for you. You can learn more about it in that way. So that's one thing you should know about. The second is we do have a digital learning analytics kind of dashboard that we've built out as part of the Core Essentials platform. And I'll just I'm only going to give you a teaser right now, but it is based around, if you can see on the screen here, this is our digital learning analytics platform. And you can imagine it can be configured in a wide number of ways. But what we've done here is we've divided it into kind of 3 categories of access, engagement, and outcomes. So clearly, students, the first step is you're trying to sort of diagnose the student's journey and is to make sure they're literally accessing. In this case, it's an LMS, but you can think about it as digital learning in a broader context. Are they accessing? And the second piece is, are they engaging? And we've developed a dashboard view to get at the engagement, because we all know access isn't enough. They need to actually engage. And then ultimately, and I'll wait for this to pop up here, and then ultimately, we will want to see how students are doing, and that's the outcomes piece. And so I'm excited for this. I think this is going to be part of the, as I said, the Essentials kind of core package. And as you can imagine, these are interesting times, and as we learn more, as always, we'll continuously improve and meet your needs. So that's my plug for where we are at the moment. I would say again, if you're interested in learning more about how to get these kind of views in your organizations, or you want to learn more about the Query Designer or really anything else, contact your data consultant, and we will meet with you to talk about your needs. Great.
Sarah, does your team want to wave at everybody so people know who they are?
Yeah, that would be great. Matt, we'll start with you. You just quickly say hi and wave.
Hello, everybody.
So this is
hey guys,
my
and
team.
I'm Dave. Sorry, I just jumped in.
Go for it, Dave.
Hey there. My face.
Hi, everyone. I'm James.
And I'm Sarah. So we each, just for context, each of us have a subset of customers that we work with, mostly geographic based. And so each one of these folks are assigned to a set of customers, and you should know who your data consultant is. Feel free to reach out to them.
Okay, so we are right about time. So we definitely have a little bit of time left for some specific questions. I know some of you reached out in chat specifically around what kinds of data can we pull in, the learning management components, and some of those. So please definitely follow back up with your customer success team. They can answer way more in depth with the variety of things we can do to support, just based on what you have happening. And I know some of you are working with 3 or 4 different LMS systems, some of your larger groups right now too. So again, definitely reach out. We'd be happy to talk a little bit further. I'm going to give it like 30 seconds of silence just to make sure everybody has time to pop in anything last minute, especially, you know, if it's something specific to, you know, those panelists in general, since they've taken their time. So that's a great question, Emma. So one of the things we didn't super touch on today, I know Anthony mentioned it early, is this kind of deficit of data we're now working with, especially around state assessment. And so the questions have kind of come up specifically just to look at, you know, how do you think that's going to change some of the data elements that you're looking at? Are you seeing the role of state assessment maybe changing, or other assessments stepping in to kind of fill the gap? Just if anybody's comfortable, maybe just kind of share how your assessment strategy might be changing.
I can start. In Osteo, this is part of, so we've got 4 subgroups meeting on fall planning, and the instructional subgroup, I know this is part of the conversation that they're trying to process through. Besides the state assessment, we've historically run NWA map assessments as well as FastBridge assessments in reading and math in terms of specific towards progress monitoring. But I know we're trying to figure out how do we better utilize those assessments, because traditionally they've been targeted at certain times of the year, and do we need to change what that assessment schedule looks like so we have kind of our in-house ongoing benchmarks. And of course, there's always the ongoing conversation about common formative and common summative assessments, which can have high fidelity oftentimes in smaller systems. And when you get to larger systems, trying to articulate those in a very strategic fashion, but definitely a part of the opportunity of and the need for larger conversations around some of those common formative and common summative assessments with localized within our district and, you know, districts as they move forward, because there isn't necessarily the reliance that we could potentially have on some of those state assessments, depending on whether they come and go based on different scenarios, as well as we've always had the conversation about the potential bias that may exist with the way that those state assessments may have been crafted at some point in time. So if we, you know, really want to get to true individualized academic needs, the larger conversation needs to exist. And at least in Minnesota, our state assessment is really designed, if you really read the test specs, for measurement of a whole school or a whole district. And sometimes we get to a space where we try and inappropriately drill down to an individual student, which the standard deviation is so far on an individual student with that state assessment that it doesn't truly give good instructional value, as well as some other local assessments that could be created could do.
Anyone else want to weigh in on the future of assessment? That is a good question in chat. Is anybody considering if we hit blended learning or remote completely, of doing some of those MAP or some of the other formative assessments from home?
In Osteo, it's been a topic of conversation, but we haven't landed on any particular decision. You know, definitely the capacity is there. How we set that up and structure that is another question, in terms with, you know, because we have district issued devices one-to-one, we can force those devices into a kiosk mode to secure the map test down or the fast assessment down. It's more of ensuring and creating a good environment for the student to engage in with those assessments, and understanding the validity around the data that comes in.
Yeah, both my children were lucky enough to partake in multiple AP assessments this spring, and that was a whole level of interesting in terms of how that's all gonna figure itself out moving forward. But it definitely is it was to create an environment that kept them focused was a challenge. So Matt, I know you work heavily with assessment data in your system. Anything else to add or anything?
No, we're just as kind of like clueless as everyone else out there. We didn't really do any spring testing besides AP. Our state stuff was canceled. The only things we did was formative assessment. So some of our classes rely heavily on STAR data, just because they have like a reading curriculum that goes along with that. So we let people do it for that. Coming in fall, I know people are really going to be craving data to find out how much learning loss was there. Was it in certain groups more than others? There's tons of like researchers that are all doing grants right now. And then basically to study this in the fall, and I'm going to be on an advisory board for one of them that's going on in fall, as long as it gets accepted. So there's a bunch of researchers that want to study this learning loss, and I'm going to be a panelist there, just kind of to help ground them in reality, since they're researchers in academia research world. And, you know, I am regularly in contact with teachers and principals, and kind of on the front line is, much as sometimes teachers think that I'm in some kind of magical tower, I'm actually a lot more connected than the researchers are. So yeah, we're looking forward to kind of study it and see what happens. But right now, we don't even know what kind of contracts to bring to the board on certain tests. We're like, well, why do we want to lock ourselves in if we can't have, like, for example, we can't have gatherings of 50 people in a room. So, well, there's no mass testing in the gym. So even if, you know, we are in session, we can't have, or we're not supposed to have, at least, you know, people doing this. And so there's all kind of like, how are kids going to, you know, perform on tests with masks on? And, you know, there's just like tons of different stuff. And I am as clueless and curious as the rest of you.
Yeah. Sarah mentioned adaptable, right? Continue to work to find ways to make things make sense for kids, right? So I have no doubt, you know, while there's not going to be a magic wand strategy that like one person comes up with that we're all like, wow, how did we not think of that? You know, I do think we're just going to continue to find ways to eat away at the problem, you know, until things settle and stabilize. So I have all the faith in the power of the group of Who Knew It, and all these districts coming together to come up with some good ideas to share. So so we are at time, and I want to respect, I know people need to be in a variety of other places. So again, thank you. Those of you that took time to jump in and ask questions, those of you that prepared, thank you again to our panelists. You guys did a great job, and thank you, Robert, for being voluntarily tapped in at the last minute there. We do want to remind you of a couple of things. Again, Sarah's team got a chance to kind of wave at you. Please know if anything came up today of interest, whether, you know, looking at Power BI, understanding how some different dashboards worked, looking at some of the LMS data analytic pieces, or you just want to meet your new person and get a chance to kind of bring them in as a thought partner and to kind of just engage in some of the dialogue you're having as a district. We would love to learn more, again, and to work alongside with you as you transition through this summer and get ready for the fall coming up. So we do have additional things that we are excited to be offering, knowing, again, that the new normal is keeping us from all coming together in some warm, sunny place in November, unfortunately. But we will be having a series of events similar to today. And so we are going to continue to bring our larger community back together to continue to learn from each other, find things that different districts are doing that are innovative. So I know that we did put out kind of a little bit of a call for presenters as well. And so if you are doing something in your system, especially with some of the new normal that's coming along, but even if it doesn't relate to COVID or some of the new challenges, but just something that's a basic foundational thing that your district's doing really well, please reach out. We'd love to be able to highlight the work that you're doing. In addition, we have kickstarted in a couple of areas with some really positive feedback, some virtual user group sessions that are much more regional in space, so that people from the same state or the same general geographical area are just kind of have a space to come together and talk about what education's like, data usage is like. So those topics are a little more open and just a little more collaborative, have dialogue to support getting to know your neighbors that are also using the platform, and also, again, just to problem solve with other educators that are also data focused. And so keep an eye out for invites to both of those different things. Some of you have already participated in some of our virtual user group sessions, so we appreciate you. And we're excited to continue to offer that and to broaden the number of places that we can provide those for you as well. So hopefully we will see your faces again soon in some way, shape, or form, whether we're on site to see you for something or showing up in a webinar. We missed you when we don't get a chance to see you. So I'll pass it back to Sarah. Is there anything you want to close us with, Sarah?
Again, thank you to our panelists. Thanks to our participants. A number of people have asked, will this recording be sent out? Will this presentation be sent out? The answer is absolutely. And feel free to share. And then for those who are on the call who are not yet part of the Hunuit community, look for some follow-up information, and hopefully you can join us. All right. With that, thanks again for your participation and all your hard work.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your day.